Everybody knows this. We had a major pandemic that happened. For you, you faced a unique crossroads during the pandemic because you were deciding between music and medicine. What was like to balance piano with that kind of preparation? What was that time like?
First of all, I didn't balance. I guess I forgot about the piano for at least 6 months, almost. Not completely, but almost.
As you prepared for Honens, what was that process like for you? And how did you prepare for each and every single round as you went up there?
I decided to switch completely the way I approach competitions for the first time in my life.
This is the legend of a woman named Anastasia. Born in Togliatti, Russia, Anastasia had a fun, slightly mischievous childhood. She enjoyed playing football, rollerblading, and other creative social activities. But one activity stood out the most: piano. At 8 years old, Anastasia and her mom moved to Moscow to study at the Central Music School of the Moscow State Conservatory under Vasily Ermakov, which is one of the world's most prestigious music schools. Early on in her lessons, Anastasia, her mom, and Vasily will discover an untapped potential within Anastasia. In just a few years, Anastasia's power level was over 9,000 because at 15 years old, she won her first international piano competition, the Concertino Praga International Piano Competition. After winning this competition, at 17 years old, Anastasia would move to Madrid, Spain, completely on her own and, at the time, not fluent in English or Spanish. Despite this, Anastasia overcame the odds and pursued a Bachelor and Master of Music in subsequent years. In 2017, she would perform Beethoven's Concerto No. 3 with Sir Andras Schiff. Anastasia was happy. But then Anastasia came to a crossroads, one that would forever determine her life. In 2020, a worldwide pandemic would occur. With live concerts locked down and with the future of music uncertain, Anastasia had two choices: music or medicine. For a time, Anastasia would spend 6 to 7 hours a day studying for her med school entrance exams. But music was always in her mind. In Anastasia's words, quote, "When I imagined a life without the piano, with only a scalpel in hand, the choice was suddenly clear. Music is, and always will be, my greatest love." End quote. And so, Anastasia would stay a classical pianist, and thank goodness she still is, because Anastasia soon decided to hone in on Honens and to compete in the Canadian Grand Slam of Piano. In the end, after each round of difficult competition, on October 25th, 2025, Anastasia won third prize at the 2025 Honens International Piano Competition. This marked a new chapter in her journey. Musical Life magazine describes Anastasia as a prodigy of the 21st century. For decades, Anastasia has overcome many obstacles in her career. But as we hone in on Honens, it is time to tell her story, her adventures, her legend. This is the legend of Anastasia Vorotnaya. Anastasia, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor.
So, let's start off from the very, very beginning. What inspired you to pursue piano?
Oh, okay. Actually, it all started simply because we had a piano, first of all, at home. And it was an enormous, mysterious object that I wasn't allowed to climb in. So the only way to approach this instrument was asking my mom to start teaching me because she knew little simple melodies, and sometimes she would play for me. And since I turned 2 or 3, I don't remember, I was begging her to either teach me or find me a teacher. And so in the end, I guess my mother became my first and most unexpected musical influencer.
Yeah, my mom was my first piano teacher as well. So,
She never told me though. She found me a teacher when I turned 4. But yeah, I was very annoying.
yeah. No, I relate to that part with having that first family connection to piano, and you were born in Togliatti, Russia. How
Yes.
was life back then, from what you can remember, and what was the music culture like back then?
Uh, Honestly, about the music culture, I cannot say much because I only started playing piano at the age of 4, and in 4 years, I already moved to Moscow. So obviously, I attended some of the concerts in Tolyatin, and I remember the city as a very um, friendly, calm, and nice city and atmosphere I was growing in. Uh, Musical life was also, from my memory, it was pretty decent. Many renowned and famous pianists and overall musicians were coming to this little city. We had a few concert halls, and also near Toliati, there's a city called Samara, which is much bigger with its philharmony, and it's only 1 hour drive from Toliati. So, yeah, it was active, it was nice, even though it's not so known city. And interesting fact though, Toliati was considered one of the most dangerous cities of Russia in 90s. All these gangsters and dangerous people were gathering there. But somehow I was lucky because by the time I was born, I turned into a very nice, small, and friendly city. So I still have friends I was growing up with there, and we still in touch. And yeah, I think I was very lucky to be born there because it shaped me in many ways into who I am now as a person.
Yeah. No, it's good that that was a foundational moment for that, because for at a very young age you eventually move on to Moscow very early. I mean, you were 8 years old at the time. You and your mom went there already that early on, and I think from going from a decently sized city like Togliatti now to essentially one of the big cities in one of the largest cities in Russia to study music at a young age must be a huge transition for you.
Ah, thanks to my mother, I guess. For me, it wasn't stressful at all. For her, it was. She was hiding sometimes at night in a bathroom crying. First of all, because she didn't see her husband, my father, for months because he was working in Tolete and we couldn't afford to move all together to Moscow. And it was going on for pretty much 4 years at least. I was seeing my father once in a while. And yes, for my mother, it was super difficult. For me, no. I actually remember that I adjusted just fine. And surprisingly, the level of education I got in Togliatti, even academic one, was apparently very decent because I didn't have any issues with studies, with finding new friends. And yes, the transition to Moscow for me as a child was easy, I must say.
Yeah. I think parents do their best to shield their children from really
My
much of
mom
this.
tried her best, yes, because
Yeah.
she's then okay. Some things, of course, I could see, but she would never explain me. So I would be like, okay, my mom is in a bad mood. She said she misses dad, but only when I started to grow up, I could realize, and she was telling me what she had to go through. And it's just, oh my God, she's really a very strong woman.
Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, it's children are often shielded from the full reality of what's happening out there.
Yes.
just outside their door, right? It's very important. So at that young age to kind of have spend more time on focusing on developing themselves as people, right? So you don't want to have to worry about at a young age all the different stresses of life that early on at that point. But studying there, you already studied under Vasily Ermakov at the Central Music School of, well, the Moscow State Conservatory. And to put this into perspective for our audience who may not be as familiar with this is essentially the musical equivalent of receiving high performance, basically Olympic level development training for young athletes if you're in the sports world who are, well, if you're trying to go for the Olympics or the World Championships, think of it as like that, right? You're going for the big one, but in a musical sense. And that's the
Mhm.
Moscow State Conservatory. For
Mhm.
you, what was it like to study there at, well, 8 years old?
Again, somehow it felt calm and quite easy. It didn't feel like entering, and honestly, didn't feel like entering some terrifying Olympic training camp, more like joining a group of equally obsessed kids that happen to spend their free time at the piano. Uh, I think because the transition happened very early, and I was maybe catching up fast too because I was still very young. Um, So no, for me, it wasn't hard at all. I remember that when we decided to move from Tolyatti to Moscow, everyone was saying to my mom, please don't do it. Are you insane? Here, she's the best. In Moscow, she will be just, I don't know, either the last or one of many. So just stay here and enjoy your happy life in a small city. And I think my mother was more worried about how I will keep up with the studies there rather than me. And soon enough, I think both of us kind of relaxed, realizing that there's no issues really. So it was for me personally, it was easy, and it's all thanks to my teachers I had in Tolyatti. Because I know the transitioning period for many children from small cities is really difficult because the difference of education levels is too drastic, too big of a gap. But not in my case, I think, because my piano teacher in Togliatti was amazing. She was very clever with what she was teaching me and the repertoire she was giving me. And she gave me a really nice base. And also my academic teacher in a school, in normal school, was an amazing human being. I still remember her. I remember her name, how she looks, as if it was yesterday. And I remember she could even stay because I was having some competitions, kids piano competitions, and sometimes I would skip school, and sometimes she even stayed after school with me just to explain new topics in math, literature, or I don't remember what we had when we were just little kids. And apparently, she was great at what she did because even in academic studies in Moscow, it felt even easier for me than in Tolyatti. Because when I moved to Moscow, I moved to third grade, and I remember that the teacher in a school was surprised when I already told her what we did in second grade in Togliatti, because they still didn't start learning some of the topics in a third grade, what we did in a second. So I think I was just lucky
Yeah.
with teachers.
Good to hear that it was a very smooth transition and,
As
well,
for me,
yeah, felt very, very fun for you at that time. And from those early teachers that you had back then, from then also with your time studying with Vasily Ermakov, what were the most important lessons that you learned from each of these different teachers?
Uh, okay, with Vasily Yermakov, for example, the first thing that stands out is the sheer amount of repertoire we cover. It was really unbelievable. I think that each second or third lessons, we were diving into something new. And sometimes I joke that I learned more repertoire with him even though I studied with him until 15, 16. Then after, since. Because literally, we covered a lot of pieces. It's very handy, especially now. And the second lesson, and it's the one I'm most grateful, I think, for, is his willingness to take risks and to trust my instincts. And what kind of instincts a 9, 10, 11-year-old has? Obviously, to play the most difficult pieces, technically difficult, in crazy tempos, just to prove that I can do it. And actually, instead of saying no, he encouraged me, and that trust shaped, I think, in me, really shaped me profoundly. He never made me feel like I'm climbing too high, or my ambitions are too big. And for this trust, I really grateful.
I totally relate to when you were mentioning about how many children want to play the most technically difficult piece at the most insane speeds ever and insane tempi ever.
Mhm.
Because that was sort of what I was sort of doing even around that age, 9 or 10 years old, where it's I heard this piece by the classic examples Franz Liszt. You hear his transcendental etudes or his reminiscence to Don Juan or all that's it's like, whoa, this piece is unbelievable. I need to learn this piece, right? And and the best part is when you actually learn the piece and it's like, oh wow, I can actually play it at close to that tempo, but it's like I can actually do it, right? And it's always like, oh, you feel a little good about yourself. But yeah, no, I think it's so important to. And when I had Jonathan Crow on a previous episode of my podcast, he is the concert master of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. And that's something that he also mentioned when he was teaching students as well. He said that you don't want to make them play. Oh, you have to play Bach the way how Bach is supposed to be played, right? Like the I don't want to say stereotypical, but the traditional, quote unquote, so to
Authentic,
speak, right?
yeah. Mhm.
Because what if there's a new idea that the musician can bring to the table, especially at that age, right? Now, of course, you
But
don't want to be doing something that's completely off base, that doesn't even make any sense even for performance itself. Like there's also a balance for that, but you don't want to stifle imagination and creativity when it comes to performance.
yes, and you reminded me of what Bashkir once told me when I was learning some pieces of Bach, because I was when I was 17 or something. It was my first year in Madrid. I took one of the pieces, Bach pieces, and I was a little bit obsessed with authenticity, how to sound back in Bach's time, and I really wanted to reproduce the era, the sound, the nuances. And then Bashkir just listened to me with his sour face. He was like, listen, I know what you're trying to do. Why would you try to sound as it was so many centuries ago if now we have a piano with so much more possibilities? If Bach would have known what kind of instruments we have now, maybe he would be pleased to change a lot of things. So can you be more creative? Can you, yes, obviously, do stylistically necessary things, but without getting obsessed and actually bringing to life and giving new life to this piece. And then it switched my mind completely. I was like, oh wow, actually. And that's why I love Baroque era. It's why I love playing Bach, because for me it's such a big field for exploring and using your imagination when you do it, obviously within some of rules, but still when you can allow yourself sometimes jump out of the box time to time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. There are some attitudes towards doing things a certain way, even here in Canada, and I even want to say the U.S. as well, where it's like, oh, it has to be. And I think, this might be a little bit scandalous to say, but sometimes not all, but some competitions run into that issue where they try to recreate a consensus as to what a certain composer would have sounded at that time, right? And while I understand where they're going with that, while I understand that it's important to maintain that, to respect the work for what it is, it's always going to be a constant gray area, a fuzzy line. It's never going to be a straight line where, oh, there's tradition and then there's creativity, right? So
Exactly. And who says that they know better?
yeah,
Because what's written in books sometimes, or when we listen to old recordings, they are still not that old, first of all. And second of all, I had some experiences with this issue, especially in competitions, exactly because I used to be super perfectionist. Like if it's written this way, I knew exactly. Actually, Bashkirov taught all of us. First of all, we played with Urtext always, and we had to know each nuance, each detail, word that is written in scores by memory. The favorite play of Bashkirov, the game, was we would play something, then he would be like, stop. And we had to stop, and he would ask us, what's written in this bar? And you cannot look at scores. And if you didn't know, oh, try to save yourself. So that's why in some competitions, I remember when I was, for example, playing Beethoven, and some jury member, after we were gathering and talking, was saying like, but why you play Sforzande here? It's not right. I was like, no, it's what's written in our text. And then he would be like, oh, really? Okay. So then I realized like, okay, sometimes they think that how they play it's already how the composer originally wanted. And sometimes, anyway, we all are humans, and even jury members, they still see things from their perspective, but not necessarily that's the only way to go. That's a problem with competitions in general. Competitions should be made usually to bring up new voices, like unique voices, but sometimes it ends up with who is the most, let's say, not irritating, not too of irritating musician, because sometimes it really can trigger different opinions. Someone can really like your interpretation of Bach or Mozart, and someone can hate it just because you're not doing it in precise way people used to hear. So that's the issue, I guess, with all competitions.
yeah, yeah. And I also want to be clear, we're not trying to bash competitions. They do have their place, and they're still important, and they still have a lot of good parts. And I should say that there are a bunch of the international competitions still do a really good job, well, awarding a very unique voice to
Yeah.
those who have unique voices, the
Yeah.
the awards, right? So I want to be clear that, if there any competition organizer out there, we're not trying to bash you guys. It's
No,
just
but
more
also we want to support you participants who are doing competitions and who believe that they're doing something wrong, maybe when they do something that is just not for everyone to understand. So,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned about Urtext. I think a good example is Chopin, because there's been a project in Poland about trying to create an Urtext, but I know for a fact that there are some, such as Janina Fielkowska, who I've had on an earlier episode of the podcast, who I think you may have met actually went at Honens, as she was a Honens judge. She mentioned on her episode that it's pretty much impossible to have an Urtext for Chopin by this time, because even if you look at the original versions, note how I said versions, plural. So Chopin was known to change even in between the original versions. So even when you go down to that path, what
yes, that's
is
what I mean. There is no one right answer how it's supposed to be. That's the issue.
exactly,
No one
exactly?
knows.
And
No
I
one knows.
think,
We all know the basics. Yes, that's true. Most of us know the basics, obviously. But yeah,
yeah,
even some nuances like in Beethoven or Mozart, even the best of pianists, performers, musicians, they disagree with each other. So what we can expect from young people that are only start being independent and they're looking for their own path, of course, You never know if it's actual mistake or not. Or sometimes I love this Horowitz. You remember this Horowitz, a movie about Horowitz, when he was actually adding some notes in Mozart. So basically, sometimes even they can correct Mozart himself, and it's okay. I think it's art, and we have to express ourselves and have this freedom in certain extents, but still not being like, okay, I see this little box, I'm inside, and I'm not going off the edges. No, no, no. Then it's just boring profession.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an art, not a science. And even science, if you have new science that actually is better science and can disprove or prove something even more than what was missing, I mean, there's still room for that, right? I mean, there's even in the world of science, there's that, let alone in art, which isn't as quantifiable and as
Yeah.
has that high of a standard of, oh, it has to be proven this way with facts and evidence from X, Y, and Z. It's, you know, there has to be room for creativity. That's what art is all about, right? So going back to your experiences, and speaking about competitions, you already had your first win at 15 years old, though, at the Concertino Praga International Piano Competition. What do you remember from that time? And take us back to that time when you won that competition. What was that whole experience like?
Oh, it was actually a big thing back then because Concertina Praga was considered like one of the biggest and prestigious competitions for young musicians. I think the age limit was until 18, something like that. And it was prestigious because basically each country had to choose uh, either one pianist to represent country, so in my case, piano from Russia, one pianist, one string player, and one wind player. And then we had to record, send everything to the competition. And they didn't know, the jury members, they didn't know from which country is who. And there's a voting, the voting should begin. And not only I got the first prize, because usually it's first, second, third in each category, like piano, string, winds, but among all the categories, they could choose like one absolute winner, basically it's a Grand Prix. And it happened to be me in 2012, in 2010. And yes, it was a really big thing because I started getting a lot of concert proposals in an amazing hosts, festivals, CD recordings, BBC, UK broadcasts, still some of those recordings. So yes, it was, let's say, beginning of my international teenage career.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a taste of what was to come, basically, back then.
uh, yeah, but to be honest, back then I was playing a lot. I think on average, since I was 9 to my 17th, I played around 60 concerts per year. So I had I had a pretty big concert career when I was a child and teenager. And I basically had to stop when I moved to Madrid because Bashkirov was really against of all of that. And he kindly asked me to stop performing and to concentrate on studies. And I guess partially he was right. I mean about studies part because I really need to study and I really need to shift my focus into becoming a musician rather than a robot, technical robot.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no, absolutely. It's always good to have that formal education under your belt to get through that part, right? So, but as we are getting into that your chapter in Spain, and as I mentioned earlier on in the episode, 17 years old, you moved to Madrid, Spain, on your own without speaking a single word of English or Spanish. How on
mhm.
earth did you get through those first few years in Madrid?
I don't know. No, honestly, I know. I just had really amazing people around me who helped me. But honestly, first 6 months were terrifying. I felt homesick, lonely, terrified, like literally like a lost child. I was very shy because also because of language barrier. I was shy to start having friends and even to introduce myself. I was shy. So, but anyway, it's actually why I started feeling like home in about 6 months because what surprised me so much that just random strangers seeing me confused in a bank, police station when I had to do my documents, etc. They would approach me asking if I need help, and they would really help me. Maybe because at the age of 17 I looked like 12, I don't know, but I believe just because they are genuinely such nice people. And I never felt since the day one I never felt like I'm a foreigner or I'm a tourist or I don't know. Because in some countries you can sense that you don't belong there. And it was opposite in Spain. I felt like maybe I was born here in my previous life, or I don't know what. Maybe I have someone Spanish in my ancestor tree. But yes, I just started feeling home, and then little by little, I developed my language skills. And basically, within a year, I could already speak more or less okay in Spanish and English. I suddenly discovered that I could communicate bravely, loudly, and with mistakes that would make any teacher cry. But at the end, people understand. I understood me. I understood them. So mission accomplished, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely mission accomplished there. And not just
Yeah.
that, but you would complete your bachelor and master of music degrees. And I apologize if I butcher this pronunciation. It was at the Escuela Superior de Música Reina Sofia under
Amazing.
Dmitri under Dmitri Bashkirev. How
Exactly.
were how were the experiences there, and your bachelor's and your master's, and from Dmitri? What were the most important lessons that you learned from there?
Truly, those years were I think, the happiest years of my life, I have to say. Um, like one of the most important lessons I learned from him is the idea that piano is a living, breathing organism, something that responds to you exactly in the way you shape your intention. And he taught me that sound begins, for example, long before the key is pressed. First, you hear, and only after you visualize and you already hear what is about to come out, you're allowed to press the key. It became one of my priorities of my technique. And he also opened my eyes on the entire science of sound projection and in large halls, in large spaces, because I still convinced that no one had a better magic of sound than him ever. I don't know what he did with the piano. No one knows. No one. Uh, Even though he was teaching us, I think none of us achieved this mastery because it's maybe impossible. He was born with it. But still, his tools are helping me still, and I'm so grateful for that. And what amazed me most actually is that his teaching keeps growing with me. Even now, every day in the practice room, I hear his voice in my head. And I finally understand that what he truly meant, uh, I understand it much more clearly because sometimes when I was a teenager, for me, it felt a little bit like a nitpicking. I could be like, come on, I didn't play that bad. And only today I'm beginning to fully grasp what he had been trying to show me all those years. And I think his teaching method was actually meant for a future rather for the moment.
Yeah, yeah. When you mentioned about sound projection, I think that is a big thing, especially for competitions, but really even for just performances in general.
Mhm.
I think back to Yanina's episode. in her experience when she won third at the Arthur Rubinstein International Competition back in 1974. Arthur Rubinstein himself was actually her mentor afterwards. And one of the most important things that he taught her was sound projection. Projecting all the way to the back of the hall and even to the dead spots of any concert hall. You may not necessarily know where they are, but you want to be prepared for even that, right? And I think
Yes.
even yeah, and I think even for recent competitors of even the Chopin competition, I think one of the big differences between those who made it through all the way to the end and those who didn't, I think that was one issue as well. They didn't know how to project themselves properly. That wasn't going to, especially because the jury, as in previous years of the Chopin competition, have been sitting up in the balcony, way at
Mhm.
the back, right? Not up in the front. So the way how they hear it, and even just hearing from other spectators who were sitting up there, it's different from sitting up close or even in the middle of the hall, right? So I think that's something that I think is a running theme that I've been seeing more and more actually on my podcast and even on other people when they're talking about the experiences of performing. Yeah.
Yes. No, no, no. It's a very basically that's the reason I wanted to study with him. Because before I met him, no one ever told me what phrasing is, what sound is, like how to play with the sound, why it's so important and meaningful. And also, can you imagine by the age of 17, I never played a single Mozart or Haydn sonata?
That's interesting. That is interesting.
Oh, I lacked a lot. And he was completely right about me canceling all the concerts and sitting in one place, learning new repertoire and studying things that I was supposed to study when I was a child. Uh, and sound was a priority, of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Mozart, of course, is fundamental. Bach is probably even more fundamental at this point
I was
because
lucky because in Togliatti, the teacher, as my school teacher, Tatiana Bobchinska, I told you about, she made me play so much of Bach, you cannot imagine. I played Bach from the morning to the night. I played all inventions, prelude and fugues, etc. That's why I think, anyway, it still, I understand that it helped me so much. And it really built me up in a good way, I guess. So that's why this lack of maybe Mozart and Haydn wasn't that obvious, because if maybe I wouldn't be uh, playing Bach so much, that kind of build up the structure in my head anyway, somehow, I could end up in much bigger trouble than I ended at the end.
yeah, yeah, and even with Bach, I mean, even the jazz tradition, there was one very well known Canadian jazz pianist, Oscar Peterson. When he taught his students, he would tell them to play Bach, even just starting out, because it's so fundamental. And even when I was playing, I mean, Kapustin, his music is kind of like a mix between classical and jazz, right? But I see it because when I see all these different, the melisma and the different progressions, even in keys and just the different modulations, I'm thinking lots of this would work well with Bach. And
For me, it's fundamental. I consider Bach as a priority composer in the development of any kid. First of all, not just musician, a kid who wants to study any instrument, Bach is gonna be so important because judging by judging my early development, I think Bach helped me so much because only now I realize I have so many friends who are uh, very big musicians, especially actually string players. They have problems with Bach, a lot of them, and sometimes they approach me like, okay, you know about Bach a lot, so what harmonies are here and there? How do I build a phrase? And for me, those questions were so uh, weird because I never thought about it because already my school teacher taught me naturally how it's built already. So when I look at the scores when I play Bach, I never ask my question what harmony it is. I kind of already know the answer, like it's difficult to explain. It's same with teams, like when like your right hand plays a team polyphonies, and you have this team in the left, and you have different voices. Also, I shouldn't already play all those voices separately because I kind of have them in my ears. And it's not because I'm a genius or something. No, it's because I was raised on this music, and I developed, like my teacher developed the skills in me in very early age. So now I have zero sufferings with all of this little things. Meanwhile, my friends, they ask me questions. I'm like, oh, wow, you actually, like, we actually have to think about it. And it's funny because since I started to teach last year, I realized that, oh, actually, some things I have to analyze now and understand why I do some in a precise way, this thing or another, just in order to help understand it to my students. So, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's essential. It's essential. If a teacher knows how to teach Bach and how to teach polyphony and nuances and all those things, it will help so much in the future of a young musician.
Yeah, yeah. And even in the world of voice, I just had Eric Holloway, who was an octavist actually, in bass. Well, basically, he sings basso profundos, so even deeper than the standard bass. In
Mhm.
his experience, even growing up, even singing, he sang in children's choir, of course, in his church, but even then, he was already exposed to four voices: soprano, alto, tenor, bass, in chorale music, of course. But even then, that eventually, when he actually ended up actually studying music in a formal sense in his 20s by that point, that's when
Mhm.
he learned about Bach and all that stuff. It's like, oh, wait a minute, actually. And he didn't even notice that until I told him. I said, I think all that experience actually informed you. And by osmosis, when you understood it, it's like, well, I get it now because I had that experience. I told him, I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'll go with that. I'll go with that. But, I mean, in his experience, same thing. It's the same thing. So Bach is very, very, very influential, really, in any music or voice discipline that any instrumental
Yeah.
voice discipline. Anyway, really, when you're studying that,
And it
yeah,
has an amazing power of recharging your, basically to calm down, to have less anxiety. Because I notice that if I'm nervous or something, in order to calm down and to recharge my brain, if I play Bach, it's like meditation. I don't know how it works, but it works. And my dog can actually confirm because when she's behaving bad, I start playing Bach, and she's an angel in a few minutes.
I think this
It
is
works
where
really.
yeah, I think this is where Nicholas Namorantz's research would come in handy, because when I had him on the show, he was a part of the section. A section of the episode was actually devoted to his neural recital and his research that was there. He's also a neuroscientist. In fact, during the pandemic, he actually pursued a neuroscience degree and did a postgrad and whatnot. I think his research, it's groundbreaking in a lot of ways because it directly screens using an EEG, using something called the glass brain, which is a new invention by I think the University of San Francisco. I think I could be wrong on the university, but it's called the glass brain, and it records him playing different repertoire like Scriabin, Mozart, all these different composers, and it actually maps in real time what parts of the brain fire as you're playing
Mhm.
that music. And depending on what repertoire you're playing, according to what Nicholas told me, he said that different parts of the brain actually fire and react differently to different repertoire. So when it comes to relaxation, in his research, he says that it's still very early, but with more research done, we could actually directly target parts of the brain using music as a form of therapy. So I think from his neuroresearch, you should probably check it out. He was the 2018 winner of Honens. So but you should probably check out his work as well because I think and I've been keeping in touch and keeping in tabs with his work because I think it's really important and fascinating. It's groundbreaking already in so many ways, and we can only see how far it would go. So I think that could be an answer. You might find an answer there.
Yeah. I guess I will check it out.
Yeah, yeah. And returning back to your own experiences performing, you also mentioned, well, actually, we were talking before we started recording, but you also studied under Stanislav Ioudenitch at Park
Yes.
University. How was that
Mhm.
transition to the United States? And what were the most important lessons that you learned from him?
Uh, First of all, I think I will always be grateful so much to him because he gave me, you cannot imagine, he gave me so many hours of his time. Sometimes I would actually ask him to listen to my run through more than once per day. And he has an insane schedule and he never said no to me, which is extremely big thing if you knew because he's teaching in three schools, I think maybe more already. I don't know. But he was traveling all the time, being super busy. At the same time, he always could find a room for me, always was very supportive, and his teaching broadened my perspective. He helped me understand that music is not about right or wrong, good or bad. The real question is, are you convincing enough or not? And I love that he also allowed me to disagree with him, to even argue sometimes, make mistakes, and search for my own path. And he supported me through this process. And I remember one day he actually said, I think it was one of my last years, either 2 years before I finished or already my last year, he approached me saying, listen, uh, you should finish your studies because you already know everything you need to know. And the only thing that you have to do is to finally believe in yourself. And I think he was right because somehow I was always under someone's wing. I never was left alone with myself as an actual artist, let's say. And when you're constantly under a professor's wing, I don't know, in my case, I felt responsible not only for my own artistic choices, but also for not disappointing them. And as a result, I often ended up with interpretations that were neither fully mine or truly theirs, and a kind of musical compromise that didn't feel authentic. So, and when in early 2023, I basically became my own teacher, uh, thanks to the background I had of Tatiana Babchinskaya, Vasily Yermakov, Dmitry Bashkirov, Stanislav Ioudenitch. Thanks for all these knowledges they inserted in me. When I stood alone, something surprising happened. Instead of fear and I don't know, I just felt incredible freedom and a powerful desire to create on my own rules. And it's still this way. So I think I should really be grateful for Stanislav to make me to believe in myself. And now I understand what he meant because back then I thought that he wants to get rid of me. He just doesn't want me in his studio anymore. And now I finally understood that he just knew exactly what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there comes a point where you have to define yourself, especially in a creative profession like music. You have to define what your own style is, right? And we'll get to that later on in the conversation about musicality and musical style. Going back just a few years back, 2017, you perform Beethoven's Concerto Number 3 with Sir Andras Schiff. What was that experience like?
Terrifying. I remember that on the day of this con because we had two concerts together. But first one was in one of the biggest halls in Spain, and oh my God, I was shaking. I was really afraid and terrified. But it happened. Wasn't too bad. So yes, and after this concert, we actually still keep amazing relationship, and he always helps with advices when he comes to Madrid. We see each other, so. yeah, it was an amazing experience, and I'm very happy that I had a chance to be with him on one stage.
Yeah, yeah, no, good to hear that it worked out and you're still in active in active contact. It's such an important
Yes, we're an
connection.
active contact. More than that, he actually recommended me to so many festivals. I didn't even know about that. So I could get invitation to perform, for example, in Menuhin Festival, which is a pretty big one in Switzerland. And then suddenly, the director of the festival could approach me saying like, "Oh, Andras Schiff actually recommended you." I would be like, "Oh, really?" So not only that, he actually helped me a lot throughout my career and my development. So I'm very grateful.
Very, very good to hear, and great to hear all the success on that part. In 2020, everybody knows this. We had a major pandemic that happened. For you, you faced a unique crossroads during the pandemic because you were deciding between music and medicine. This would actually be the second time that you would consider this. We were talking a little bit before we started recording that this would actually be the second time that you considered going down this path.
Yeah.
And you were studying 6 to 7 hours for your medical school entrance exams. What was like the balance piano with that kind of preparation? What was that time like?
First of all, I didn't balance. I guess I forgot about the piano for at least 6 months, almost. Not completely, but almost. And as I told you before the interview, I was such a complete idiot. Now I realize how of a big idiot I was because so many friends of mine during the quarantine, they learned so many pieces, so much of the repertoire. No, Anastasia was learning everything but that. And I think I practiced piano maybe 1 hour. Not if per day it's good, I think not even every day, but 6, 7 hours for sure. Biology, chemistry, genetics, and all the things. So at some point, I just realized that okay, everything is good, but it's either medicine or piano. Basically, both of those professions they require your entire focus. And then I just realized, especially when it seemed that finally we started to go out from this horrible lockdown, and finally concerts started to return and competitions again started to invite us. I was thinking, and I don't know, I just part of me really wanted to go and see what I can do in medical field, but another the bigger part of me was no, you can't do it because your heart is in another place. Even it cannot be divided. The heart in this context it cannot be divided because both of these professions they require you either all in or out. You cannot be half there and half there. So yes, I just chose to follow my initial dream of becoming a musician.
Yeah, and it's you said it perfectly. It's all in or all out, and that was essentially what drove me to make a career shift into law. Honestly, because for me, as I was talking with you before we started recording, that was where I was at. I was at a point where when I was about to prepare to compete in the Canadian Chopin competition back in 2014, but I had to ask myself a very sincere question. Do I see myself performing for the rest of my life? Do I see myself doing that? Now,
Mm-hmm.
from a fantastical perspective, the answer is yes, because you know it's like almost like a romanticized kind of idea in my head, especially for an 18-year-old at the time, right? And but from a practical standpoint, for my situation at least, for me myself, the
Mm-hmm.
answer was pretty much a no because it's a difficult life. It's a difficult life, at least from my own experience, right? So it may be, I mean, it may not be as difficult as in your experience, but at least for me, for my circumstances, I thought maybe not the best pathway to take, long term at least, right? So all in or all out. I said, well, I have to go. I can't go all in on piano. I just can't, especially at that time already, as you know, you and I are around the same age.
Mm.
It's already, people are already getting really, really, really good. And what do? They devote their entire time. This is different from sports in the sense that in sports, don't get me wrong, you still devote your entire time to sports. But in universities here in Canada and the US, some schools give scholarships for you to stay in school while competing in whatever sport you're in. So you can play basketball, volleyball, soccer, American football, rugby, swimming. You can do whatever sport or discipline that you want to be here while also pursuing a degree in pretty much any discipline that you want. But
Mhm.
when it comes to music, and you see it in all these competitions, there's maybe one or two people who did not pursue a music degree or a music background. Everybody has pursued at least one or two, maybe even three degrees even in music, right? So I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I can compete with that because if I can't go all in because I want to make sure I have my schooling in for something
And
else other than music.
yes, and I support you fully. As I told you before, you did you chose well. If you were my kid, I would be very happy that you chose the path of becoming a lawyer rather than becoming a musician. I was always joking, because some people around there like, oh, one day when you will be having kids, they will be so lucky because you will teach them piano. I'm like, nope. If they will want to, unfortunately, I will have to hire someone because, okay, like I cannot forbid it, but God forbid, I don't want to become a musician whatsoever.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the kind words on that one. I know my family's also very happy I became a lawyer as well. So
Yes, even my father, he was always telling me like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy that you're my daughter, not my son." And I was always like, "But why?" He has a son, by the way, but and he was like, "Because you're a pianist, and as a girl, I can live with it." But if you were a boy and then use it, you have to support a family to be like this provider, a main provider. I would be so worried about you. So, because yeah, it's not such a easy path. Depends of the goals, obviously.
yeah,
When the goal is just to be around music and in any way, oh, there are so many ways. Yes, but if the goal is to build only solo career, it's a very demanding and very difficult path.
it
Not
is.
as shiny and brilliant as everyone thinks it is.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. And that again, that was why I decided against it at the end of the day because and speaking as a lawyer, don't get me wrong, there are also some very, very difficult parts about being a lawyer. But comparing to what I would have had to do as a pianist, the stakes actually aren't even that high. And this may be a little bit confusing for any lawyers who may watch this or listen to this podcast because don't get me wrong, the stakes that we face are very, very high already with
Mhm.
whether or not we settle or win a case in whatever area of practice that we're in as a lawyer. But the worst case scenario is let's say we lose that. We still have a bunch of other cases left that can be on the horizon. It's still going to hurt, but it's not like this will completely destroy our career.
Mhm.
But for a pianist, one or two bad performances, the word gets around the world very, very quickly. And even before social media, that was the case. That was the case. So now with social media, I mean, a part of me has always wondered how you, Elizabeth, Athena, and really all the other pianists that I've had, Janina as well. How do you deal with that sort of thing, right? How do you deal with that kind of thing? Right? You don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable, of course, but
But what exactly? You mean the nerves, the
it
responsibility?
it's like the like one or two bad performances. I'm not saying your case, but like for me, it seems
Oh, okay.
like
I know, I
one
can
or
answer that.
yeah,
Before, because until I think until the age of 23, I cannot say that I had some, let's say, performances that would be out of my control. They could be worse or better, but at least I would be in control. But then something happened once. In one actual of the competitions, I played horror. I don't know what happened. It felt like someone cursed me or something. I couldn't play technically, I couldn't play musically. It was just not me. Some robot machine, very broken robot was performing. And oh my God. And after this performance, I started getting anxiety on stage because I was constantly afraid that I can lose my mind suddenly because it never happened to me. I was always super, mm, let's say, I was known for not committing mistakes, for being always more or less consistent with the performance. I would never have memory slaps. I would never have some horrible technical issues. But on this precise day in the competition, I had all of that, like everything. And then this fear was building up in me that it might happen again. And it turned into real anxiety. And I was dealing with it for so many years, you cannot even imagine. But I don't know, I think in my case, what helped me, uh, maybe the fact that, I don't know, I just realized that I don't know for how many years longer I will be able to be on stage uh, because of some hands problems, for example. Maybe this triggered different approach. It's just somehow I realized that better to commit thousands of mistakes on stage, but being alive, rather than being perfect, but dead inside. And that's exactly how I felt about my, let's say, nothing special. It was I was playing everything as I was supposed to, but nothing unique was happening on stage. But as soon as I just let it go and didn't care about those mistakes anymore, I realized that then some magic is actually happening. And that's why, honestly, I don't care if some of my video recordings are out there where I play bad, where I forget scores, or I play horrible technically, because I think it's living proof of us being people, live people, that one day we can be good, one day we can be absolutely not good, and that's okay. Come on, Richter, Gillis, even Bashkirov I studied with, were they always perfect? No, but that's their magic actually, because they were unique. They weren't perfect, they were unique individualities, and that's what's the most important thing. And it actually sometimes I get sad when people crave for this perfectionism, because I was there. It never leads you to a good path. It only destroys the real meaning of the art.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think things are a lot better now because as more and more people understand the work that goes into being a pianist, being an artist, I think it's better now because now people who previously have had, I mean, and I'm talking about people who have little to no musical training whatsoever. Like they are completely, like 0% basically in knowledge in terms of what pianists do. I think with them knowing that, they understand, wow, that's a lot that goes into it. So it's a lot more forgiving for some people, I think, when even if there is, and I've seen even in recent competitions too, there are some pianists who just can't get the performance started. They just can't because like what they were through what you were going through in that moment, right? And I think a lot more people are forgiving of that because it's like, well, okay, yeah, it's probably a bad day for that pianist, right? Or I mean, and I've seen in some instances, even in the comments, some people are actually defending them because, yeah, like this guy's actually legitimately good. He just had a bad day today, right? So I think it's a better environment now than it was, honestly, 10 or 11 years ago. I think it, like for me, at least in my experience here in Canada, it just seemed,
Okay, maybe in Canada, because I a little bit disagree, because for me it seems like, for example, 40 years ago, no one would have cared about some wrong notes or something at all. And for with Chopin, for example, competition, not this one, but I think it was previous one. I had even a post on Facebook, very angry post. I usually don't write anything. I don't care about social media, but I was really triggered by the fact that so many of my colleagues were sending around some videos of the participants that could have some troubles on stage, and I felt forced to write a post on Facebook asking, first of all, to never send me anything like that ever, and just reminding them that, come on, you're musicians yourself, you're pianists, violinists, whoever, you can do even worse mistakes. And how would you feel if someone would be spreading the word and basically mocking or laughing at it?
Mhm.
I know that it's human nature sometimes, to look at it and thinking like, oh my God, what a horrible thing happened, and being happy that it didn't happen to you. But still, I think it's very important. And maybe now we will start to have more and more competitions. I'm sure, for example, that Honens, if something would have happened, uh, no one would react as bad. Even Chopin competition now, Clyburn, as it would be, maybe you're right, like 10 years ago. But still, uh, there is always some percentage. Even Elizabeth, I think, said that when it happened, something happened with her iPad. I think she said somewhere that she was afraid that because of that, she would be kicked out, and she wouldn't pass from the semifinal to the final. That tells that we all are afraid that because of some little mistakes that are not even connected to music, we can already get kicked out. So I think it's changing, and it should change, because exactly, music, it's not about what we did wrong or what we did good. It's about what we can bring in general to this world.
You stayed in piano.
Yes.
So, what inspired you to hone in on Honens?
Uh, uh, Actually, about Honest, I think it's the sheer freedom of building my own program. It's one of the very few, maybe the only competitions, I guess, that it just it it's not just feels like you're checking boxes as a pianist, because usually in competitions we have like a list of requirements in regards of repertoire, but here it felt like I'm an actual artist with a voice, and since I always loved unconventional repertoire, which, as you can imagine, has gotten me into troubles more than once, especially in competitions. uh, I don't know. Mm, it felt like the right choice to participate there, because I remember even how I chose the Honors when I started to think about it. I was with my friend in one of the competitions, and I was in the finals, got a second prize. And when I was speaking with the juries, some of them were pleased, but some of them were questioning my choice of repertoire, because basically in the finals it was solo round. I again chose Medner and Nightwind as a primary piece, like the crown of the entire program. And they disagreed with this choice. They were like, come on, we don't know this sonata. It's very difficult to judge, which I understand them completely. That when someone plays known repertoire for its difficulty or musicality or other aspects, when you don't know the music, probably it's difficult to compare. But still, it felt like Honen's. Um, in Honens, I could be more myself and to express my individuality, and that actually it will be welcomed rather than tolerated. And for me, it seems that this competition is exactly where being myself isn't a, let's say, strategic disaster. So, yes, and I think it actually worked out the way I planned and the way I imagined, because I think maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but maybe the part of uh, this successful participation in this competition was exactly the programming. I don't know, but I suspect maybe.
Yeah, no. And as you chose to go down Honens, as you prepared for Honens, what was that process like for you? And how did you prepare for each and every single round as you went up there?
You mean semifinal, final, or from quarterfinal?
From everything.
Okay, let me remember. So actually, quarterfinal, it was easy. I just played some recitals with the same program, so uh, wasn't stressful at all. And my preparation to the, let's say, main thing already was super calm and chill, I must say. I decided to switch completely the way I approach competitions for the, I guess, for the first time in my life. Somehow I was like, okay, I'm 30. It's probably my last competition. Let let it go as it goes. And I wasn't practicing much. I was more practicing within my brain and reshaping in my brain the music itself, like the repertoire and its inner structures, architecture, and history I want to build around. I was walking all the time around Madrid in parks with my dogs, with my headphones. I was listening some performances. I was sometimes recording myself, and then I was going on a walk. And it's one of my favorite ways to practice. I just record myself, and I listen, and I I can feel better what it's lacking from the outside point of view. Um, and basically, it was like meditative way of preparing. I would put it this way, because maybe clean hours I would spend 2, 3 hours practicing, and the rest it would be just thinking, imagining, like visualizing sound, form. Uh, yes, only when I already. And also, I was working, so I didn't want to overcharge my hands, overcharge my brain. So since I worked long shifts in conservatory, and I didn't spend much of a time playing on the keys rather thinking about the keys. And only when I came to Canada, I started actually practicing. And since we had such an amazing, I think I had the best runway in my life at my host family's house. It was just a pure joy. And yes, I started to practice more. And I could focus already solely on the competition. And semifinals were smooth fine. I wasn't worried at all. Only maybe I would say that the transition in between semifinal and final was quite difficult for me, because I was playing one of the last semifinal, and it happened to be that I didn't have a single, let's say, free day before the finals. There was always something, and I just felt a little bit exhausted physically, I would say, because the results were revealed very late, and same morning we had to already prepare for judged interview components. So then rehearsal with orchestra, next day rehearsal with quintet, and the competition, the final begins basically. And I really wished I had at least one day to just breathe and have, I don't know, have time to sleep and practice only my stuff. But that's why it was a bit more stressful, let's say. But overall, it was it was smooth. It was going smooth for me, smoothly, smoothly.
It
That's my
certainly,
English.
yeah, it certainly was going very smoothly for that entirely the competition. And what's interesting about Honens also is that just like every other competitor at the competition, you were required to learn the commission piece, Fracture,
Mhm, mhm.
by Iman Habibi, who I've also had on a previous episode of the podcast. What was your process of learning, understanding, and uniquely interpreting Fracture?
I don't know. It's usually with pieces like this. First of all, I must say that I love contemporary music. And with pieces like this, I always begin this way. Before I play a single note, I first try to see the markings of the composer, their notes, their intention, and their thoughts, and I try to shape this piece. The to see the landscape it creates, the form, the architecture, the climaxes, where it, like the way it builds itself. Basically, I try to analyze it, and once I have this, let's say, mental map, I start to build my own world inside of it, and I think it just our inner worlds with Iman maybe found each other if he liked it. Maybe I was close enough to what he heard himself composing this piece. At least I hope.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because when I was listening to Fracture, the opening is really reminiscent of Rachmaninoff's piano sonata number two.
Ta-da. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I was just like, wait a second, right here. Oh man, I mean, but also even hearing Iman's own inspiration for Fracture was it gave a lot of new perspective into it, right? And it was basically talking about how your one's foundations, childhood foundations, are fracturing because its time is always evolving and we're just in an uncertain future, right? And yeah, yeah, no. And when I heard that, it brings it into so much context because I think it's also a very timely piece for Honens. And I think, I mean, obviously you end up winning, I mean, the best performance award of the commission pieces as well. And I think everybody who performed it just performed it very, very well, just in general, just overall, because it sort of reflects, even though you all didn't even know what that, or maybe had a very limited knowledge of what that background was behind that. I think you were able to unknowingly express that in each of your performances. I think that's what my personal opinion is.
Well, I think even composers, when they write their piece, it's not like they put one precise thought into it. They have an entire universe inside and within them while composing. So even in the name fracture, it's not necessarily only fracture about one theme. It's basically the entire fracture of us as a human beings, and what we feel like a fracture in our own life. That's how at least I see it, not only in this precise piece, but in general. I think it's one of misconceptions too, to try to rationalize what exactly the composer was thinking while writing the piece. It's super important to know what period of life he had, what issues he struggled with, what he wanted from this life, what he loved and cherished, etc., etc. But can you imagine what kind of universe and inner thoughts such a composer's mind can have while composing? I believe that it cannot be only about one subject in particular, or few subjects. It's so much deeper. And it's about all of us. We experienced one thing or another in our own personal ways. So, yeah, that's why I'm absolutely sure that everyone played this piece wonderfully, but from their own perspective and from their own experience. That's why I said that probably just mine aligned more, or I don't know, just felt more familiar to Iman.
Yeah.
Yes, at the end of the day, I think it's so much deeper than the simple description of the piece.
Yeah,
In that
and
sense.
that's the reason why. So when I interviewed Iman, it was actually just before the competition happened. I intentionally waited until the competition was over, then I would release the episode because I didn't want to give first of all I didn't want to give anybody an unfair advantage and by accident, and second of all, I didn't want to accidentally color any of your interpretations, right? Because I mean, you just can't control it, right? It's the internet. It's YouTube, social media, especially if it's on brand with Honens. It's directly relevant to what you guys are doing. So
Yes.
so for me, I'm thinking, yeah, I I need to wait until everything's done. That way, all the performances there are truly original. You
Mhm.
really, it comes directly with absolutely no influence from, at the very least, my end, but also
Mhm.
like no influences from any external factor whatsoever, as much as I could. And that's why, and I'm happy I did that because then that really gave a more organic. It made it clean, like in a lot of ways. It made it clean from a logistical perspective, I should say. So, I did that on purpose. You know, I didn't want to have any kind of influence like that on you guys at all. So, you
Yeah.
know, but it's good to mention the deeper aspects of it because that all comes down to musicality.
Mhm.
What is musicality to you?
Ah, it's not that simple question, I must say. If I were to put it into words, maybe it would be logical to express it this way. Let's try. That maybe the way I feel is that musicality is the ability to feel the world in a very sensitive, subtle way, and to express those inner feelings through sound. And it's a special kind of sensitivity, I guess, that helps music connect what we feel inside with the other's experience. Was I clear or not really?
No, I think you were clear. And I guess a follow up to that is how do you develop your own unique musical style?
Uh, I don't. Why would I? No, to me, honestly, forcing a unique style, uh, it means looking out. There is this word outward, right?
Yeah.
Yes, out. Looking outward for, I don't know, approval instead of looking inward for truth. And in then art loses its sincerity that way, I think. And I'm not interested in being recognized from the first note I play. I'm interested in being felt. And my style is simply a reflection of what I love and what I want to share.
And in the theme of Honens, what do you think is the complete artist? And how do you embody the complete artist? I know these are all very hardball questions, but to the best of your
Oh,
ability.
actually, what is complete artist to you? I was throughout the competition. I think I answered this question so many times, so I really don't want to repeat myself. So I will try to be more creative this time, but still, basically, I guess providing the same meaning. So I would say that complete artist um, is someone who remains true to their principles, artistic vision. Uh, who always expands their knowledge and refines their craft. Um, Also, for me, it's essential that complete artist has developed a very acute inner ear that allows them to assess their own performance in a very objective, accurate way. Uh, Basically, everything they do it with intention and never empty, never meaningless. And if I will go to your second question, how do I embody complete artists? Honestly, for me, it begins with a commitment to never betray what feels true in life or in music. Um, I try to cultivate sincerity as a way of being, staying truthful to my inner compass, let's say my ideals and questions that shape me. And to embody the complete artist is, in my view, to live in alignment with that inner ideal, even if it stands apart from what world values or celebrates now. Um, Art becomes whole, in my opinion, when artist is whole, and when they dare to remain honest in a world that constantly invites them to compromise.
It's a great answer, great answer, and it certainly is a very creative one that builds upon what you've gone through at Honens after everything that has happened in the last just a few months ago at this point. In your career, from all the places that you've been in so far, what are the greatest misconceptions of music that other people have expressed to you?
Can't believe it. I can. You can, I'm sure. Okay. I don't even know where to start from. I have so many stories. First of all, my favorite one is when I say to strangers, especially people that they are not connected to music, that I'm a pianist. Usually, their first question is like, "Oh, nice, but what do you do for a living?" Because for them, it's like not profession. For many people, it's not profession at all. It's a hobby. But so, how do you earn money? For them, automatically, if you're a musician, a pianist, so I don't know, you're probably playing in metros, they think. I have no idea how it works. Or when non-musical friends gather in some parties and they hear that I'm a pianist, obviously I'm sure it happened to every musician. Some of them for sure will ask you to either improvise playing jazz, or they will ask to play some Beatles, Michael Jackson song, thinking that it's so easy for all of us to improvise just instantly. um and I don't know, it's just, these little things happen all the time. I have to explain people around that also we work with muscles, that you some think that at the age of 30 they can actually become professional pianists. They ask me if they can start playing same as me if they start learning now in 1 year, if they can already play what I play. So, I have to explain many little things to people that aren't connected to our art. But actually, if before, I don't know, I felt a little bit like they diminished the seriousness of what we do. And now I actually enjoy sharing and explaining to people around who we are, what we are doing, and how it all works. And actually, I see that I can get through through them, and they start to really being impressed and surprised by the amount of effort hours we dedicate our life to what we do, and the kind of life we live as musicians. So they start seeing us in from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think there's a similar reaction even here in Canada. In some parts, it's like, well, okay, well, I mean, what do you do for a living, kind of thing, right?
It's a very common question. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think here in Canada, it's interesting because I think the conceptions that you faced are, I think, a little different aside from that part, aside from the what do you do for a living misconception. I think it's a bit different from here in Canada in the sense that here people don't even bat an eye. They don't even, they're just like, what? Like a piano. For some of them, it's almost like it's a completely different world that they didn't even consider. Because Canada and the US are primarily very athletic
Mhm.
focused countries. So for them, especially speaking as a Canadian, hockey is Canada's pastime.
I
Every,
know, actually, I love Canadian hockey.
yeah, I know
Very
Canada and
good.
Russia are rivals, so yeah.
I must say you're awesome.
so but yeah, so every single parent has brought their kid. Well, I shouldn't say every single parent, but more so than not, parents bring their kids to hockey. They learn to play hockey. They learn to skate. They play through the leagues. Some of them are very, very devoted one day to hit the NHL or even the KHL, but mostly the NHL because it's right here in Canada and the US, of course. So even if they don't get into the NHL or into a professional league, there's still that passion for it. But because it's all so athletically focused here in Canada, when it comes to music, it doesn't even register for them at all. And I remember even last year, well, I remember 2024, end of 2024, at the time I was still working with the Canadian Chopin Society and co-organizing the 2025
Mhm.
Canadian Chopin competition. And I was
Mhm.
talking with some of my lawyer colleagues, some who were more senior, and very, very nice people. Don't get me wrong, very, very nice people. And for them, like their mind was just blown. It's like there's an entire world where you compete like this, and it's like, yeah, Well, I mean, to use sports terminology, if the Olympics of piano is a Chopin competition, then the Canadian Chopin competition is the Olympic qualifiers here in Canada, and they're thinking, "Whoa,
But you know what
we
surprises me? They get so surprised when when we talk about our competitions and how we compete, how we earn money, and how we achieve our goals. But no one is surprised by the fact that there are a bunch of professional gamers who do their living by playing video games, and this
exactly."
doesn't surprise anyone.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a bit of a gamer myself, honestly. I used to play quite a lot of games back when I was younger. Still do a little bit now, but not as much now, of course. But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, being on YouTube, there's a there's so many people who post let's plays for a living, right? For as gamers, right? So it's in music, yeah, it's a similar deal here in Canada and the US, being again so athletically minded that they don't even realize that musicians can be just as competitive. It's just not necessarily only in a physical sense, but it's in an intellectual sense. And frankly, I mean, when you're playing, especially when you're playing in these very high level competitions, it could be very physical too. We sweat a ton, especially when we're wearing suits or dresses, depending on our attire. We sweat in this formal attire. So it's
I remember there was some report about pianists burning same amount of calories as some kind of sport, like some athletes during their training. I don't remember the numbers. I don't want to lie, but I just remember it was really impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, and even breathing. I mean, I'm very sure you've run into an issue with learning how to breathe properly when playing certain pieces. That's also a thing in music too that a lot of athletes don't necessarily realize, because the way how you breathe, even especially if you're playing a wind instrument or a brass instrument, but even if you're playing a percussive instrument like piano, you still have to. I mean, the proper way to breathe, especially in the very difficult running passages or difficult technical parts, is also an important thing that you have to learn with time and experience. But these sorts of things, it's very similar to athleticism in a traditional sense, so to speak, because it just takes that much work. But there's that sort of misconception here in Canada that, oh, you can just play a couple four chord progressions and you'll be the next Katy Perry or the next Taylor Swift or Michael Bublé or whoever it is, right? So it's yeah, but I think it's starting to change a little bit here in Canada now with live streaming and YouTube and more two-set violin being, I mean, probably one of the more well-known classical music YouTubers. I think it's changing a lot here in Canada and the US. So, what are the most rewarding aspects of your career so far? And what are the most important lessons that you've learned from your career thus far?
Hmm. Ah, I think the most rewarding moments I experience in my career are the ones when I get to connect with the audience. Mm, it's this magical moment of energy flowing from one human being to another. Also, another aspect are my students when I also see their eyes lighten up when finally something starts to work out and we were fighting for it for so long. And I see that finally they get it. Finally, something is going to the way we so desperately were trying to get to. So these little moments, they give me such a joy, and I feel so blessed that I'm in this profession. And the lessons I've learned, mm, I think what I told you before, I think one of the main lessons for me is when you develop as a musician, when you're very young, and you have mentors, teachers around you, it's very important to be super attentive, super um, serious about the studies. But as soon as you finish your formal studies or education, if before you had to listen every word that was said to you and you had to analyze it, obviously, not just listening and blindly doing, then when you're on your own, you should stop listening anyone but yourself. That's actually the main lesson for me. It works. It's not for everyone, obviously, I know that for me, it's one of the most important lessons because as soon as I develop this autonomy, when I know for sure what I want to achieve, how I hear this has to sound, and I know exactly what tools I have to use in order to get there, even if I have performances where I don't get there, it doesn't mean that I won't. It just will happen later on, but at least I have the goal and I know how to get there. I think that's what I learned the most. It's being autonomous, independent. So,
And with everything that's happened so far, what is next for the great Anastasia Vorotnaya?
that in one of my interviews, I actually already said that I never make long-term predictions, and it's just I know that as a moment I will tell you what's next, it's not gonna happen. So I'll put it this way: I want to devote myself completely to what I'm doing now, and I trust that life will lead me to a place where I need it most.
As we begin to close this episode, I know that you've had your comments about pursuing a career in classical music for other people, but what is your advice to those who do want to pursue a career in classical music, especially in the world of piano?
Oh. So I would put it, I mean, maybe it will sound horrible. I'm sorry already, but I would say, I would put it this way. If your dream is to become only a concert pianist, like your ego wants only this and nothing else, think twice. And always have a backup plan. Like in your case, I think it's amazing that you were interested in law school, and I consider that those people with a lot of desires to be on stage, only on stage, they also have to think about something else, just in case this won't work out. This path of solo performer, it's really beautiful, but it's extremely demanding and unpredictable, unfortunately. No matter how great you are, it's sometimes just unpredictable. But again, if you want to build your life around music and you don't care so much being at the center of this epicenter, musical life epicenter, but rather being involved in music itself, then I guess you just do what you love. You build up your goals. You create a plan how to get there, how to achieve your goals. You find nice mentors. Maybe you start to connect with people that are in this topic you're interested in, and you learn from them. And I think it's amazing, and you just never stop growing. And there are many meaningful ways to live a musical life.
And last question, what would you like to say to your fans?
First of all, thank you for being with me. Um, I carry an overwhelming sense of gratitude and love for you, for them. And thank you for walking this path with me. And thank you for letting me share my world with you. Because you're the reason I will do everything possible to remain on stage for as long as I can.
Great words to end on. And Anastasia, thank you so much for taking the time to show up on the podcast and to share your experiences from your young days all the way up until now. It's been very, very much an adventure for you for the last so many decades. And thank you so much for sharing all that. I think the viewers and the listeners are going to very much appreciate the living legend of Anastasia Vorotnaya.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to our audience for tuning into this episode of This is the Legend of. This has been Anastasia Vorotnaya, the third prize winner of the 2025 Honens International Piano Competition. You can follow her on Instagram at Anastasia Vorotnaya, as well as her website, www.anastasiavorotnaya.com. So if you want to follow up on all of her updates and all the different projects that she has been involved in, this is a great place to go at this point. You can also follow us on our Instagram at This Is The Legend Of, as well as our different platforms. Remember to, for Zon the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and click the bell notification icon so you'll always be notified whenever we upload or go live. As well, be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio if you want to listen to the audio-only versions of our episodes wherever you are on the go. And also visit us on our website, www.thisisthelegendof.com. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this episode and tuning into this episode. Signing off for now, this is Amos Vang. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay legendary.